Well, hello everyone, and welcome. My name is Ken Jobst, and this is Taste and See. Taste and See is a new web series that's being brought to you through St. Stephen Church here, and we're going to be taking a look over these next several weeks on the topic of food and faith. We're going to be looking at a number of different Bible passages and see how what's going on in the Bible with respect to food is reflected in our faith practice and in the way we live our everyday lives. One of the things that jumped out to me as reading through the Bible is the number of times Jesus is involved with food. You could basically eat your way through the Gospel of Luke. At every major turning point in Jesus' ministry, there seems to be a meal. From the very first miracle that Jesus does, it happens at a feast, at a wedding feast in Cana of Galilee, where he turns the water into wine. By the way, he does that in a kitchen, and it was the servants in the kitchen who understood what was going on. I think that speaks to us today. Or Jesus' most famous miracle was a food miracle also, the feeding of the 5,000, a miracle that's recorded in each of the four Gospels. So there's a lot to be said about food in the Bible, and I just want to start with Taste and See, with answering the question, why is food emphasized so much in the Bible? And I'm going to start out with a hypothesis, and here's my hypothesis on why food is mentioned so frequently in the Bible. See, I believe that food is for the body an analogy of what spiritual nourishment is to the soul. So we can see that in the Bible, food is associated with hospitality. It's associated with a sense of belonging. Food in the Bible is associated with community and being a part of the community. Eating is a social act, but it's also an act that we have to pay attention to what is proper and what is improper, what is clean and what is unclean. So all of these topics are covered in the Bible, and from the Old Testament to the New Testament, food is a thread that goes through the entire story of the Bible. In the Garden of Eden, there were trees that were suitable for food, and then there were other trees not to be touched or not to be messed with. When we make it all the way to heaven, we're going to find that in heaven there's the wedding supper of the Lamb. So from Genesis to Revelation, food is a part of the story of faith, and it's a part of us as spiritual beings. Today I'd like to start out our first session. We're in Season 1, Episode 1 of Taste and See. Taste and see that the Lord is good. And I want to just mention for a moment, that's from Psalm number 34, verse 8. David says that we are to, it's a command, he says we are to taste and see that the Lord is good. Now, you can take that two different ways. You can take that we should taste that the Lord is good and see that the Lord is good. Or we could take it that when you taste, you will be able to see and acknowledge that the Lord is good. See, now, that tasting part means you need to get personally involved to recognize that the Lord is good. So we'll be exploring and developing that theme over the next many weeks. And I hope you'll be an inviter. I hope that you will subscribe and continue to be a part of this wonderful ministry of St. Stephen Church, Taste and See. For this first episode, I'd like for us to turn our attention to the book of Genesis. We're going to look at Genesis chapter 18, verses 1 through 14. Now, this is an account in Genesis in which there are some travelers who come by the tent of Abraham and Sarah. And these travelers show up unexpectedly, and they bring some remarkable yet unexpected news to Abraham and especially to Sarah. They bring her the news that she will be bringing forth a child whose name is going to be Isaac. But before we get to that part, there's a little episode involving food. So let's take a look. You can take a look in your own Bible in Genesis chapter 18, and we'll look at verses 1 through 14, or just listen along with me. By the way, I'm using the King James Bible because it's just a wonderful translation that I love to come back to from time to time for the resonance of it. Genesis 18, verse 1. And the Lord appeared to him in the plains of Mamre, and he sat in the tent door at the heat of the day. Now, pay attention that this is Abraham. He's seated in the tent door in the shade, but it's the heat of the day, right? The sun is just bearing down on everything outside the tent. Verse 2. And he lifted up his eyes and looked, and lo, 3 men stood by him. And when he saw them, he ran to meet them from the tent door and bowed himself toward the ground. Now, you see how the postures changed there? That Abraham was seated and the travelers come by his tent door. The travelers, of course, are traveling. They're mobile. And Abraham gets up, right? And the scripture says he ran to meet them from the tent door and bowed himself. So he starts seated, he gets up, he runs, and he bows himself to the travelers who are traveling by. Now, right here I need to interject just a little bit of cultural insight. It turns out that in the ancient Near East, hospitality was a very, very important value. And it was a value among all of the cultures in the ancient Near East. Part of that had to do with travel in the desert and travel in the wilderness, that it was perilous enough to be out, certainly, to be out traveling in the heat of the day in the arid, trackless desert. But also, the notion of hospitality meant that if a traveler happened upon you, that was an opportunity for you to extend hospitality, which included not only maybe a drink of water and some food, but also the protection of your house was then over the stranger. It's an interesting thing about strangers in the Bible. It's strangers that often bring a new perspective and a new point of view. Here we're going to see that it's strangers that bring in a promise of God. It grieves my heart to see that we live in such a xenophobic world these days, where we want to build walls to keep those who are different from us away. But God most frequently uses the stranger, the sojourner, the refugee, to bring good tidings of great joy, which shall be to all people. So just pay attention to how we treat those who are different from us. We continue in verse 3. And said, My Lord, if now I have found favor in your sight, once again, this is Abraham addressing the strangers, the travelers. My Lord, he addresses them, My Lord, if I have now found favor in thy sight, pass not away, I pray thee, from thy servant. Right? Let a little water, I pray you, be fetched, and wash your feet, and rest yourselves under the tree. And I will fetch a morsel of bread, and comfort ye your hearts. After that ye shall pass on, for therefore are ye come to your servant. And they said, So do, as thou hast said. So here we have Abraham. Once again, he's extending an invitation of hospitality to these 3 strangers, these 3 travelers who have come by his tent. He says to them, look, I'll get you some water, I'll make you some bread, and you come over here in the air conditioning, right? Come over here, rest yourselves under the tree. Well, my mother used to say that on a hot day, shade is good enough, right? So, come over there under the tree while Abraham is going to prepare hospitality for the strangers. He's going to prepare some food for these 3 people that are coming by. And listen to what he says. I'm going to fetch a morsel of bread. What do you think of when you think of a morsel of bread, right? A few little crumbs, maybe a crust, just a little pinch off the loaf, just a little bit of bread. Let me, Abraham says, prepare you a morsel of bread. And they say, okay, that's great. Go ahead and do that. Verse 6, this is where it gets fun. And Abraham hastened into the tent unto Sarah and said, make ready quickly 3 measures of fine meal, knead it, and make cakes upon the hearth. Okay. You got to understand here. Abraham and Sarah have been married for a good long time. I mean, they're old now. But the excitement of Abraham being able to entertain strangers with hospitality has him running into the tent to tell his wife, what? How to make bread. Make ready quickly 3 measures of fine meal, knead it, and make cakes upon the hearth. Like maybe Sarah had forgotten how to make bread. But here's Sarah, she's got this, she's got it under control. By the way, get 3 measures of meal, three measures. Well, 3 measures of fine meal, that's going to be, oh my goodness, that's a crazy amount of bread that they're getting ready to make here. I'm going to consult my all-knowing notes here. That's going to make like 50 or 60 loaves of bread. 3 measures, wait, it's just 3 people have come by. There's only 3 travelers out there. And he's going to make 60 loaves of bread? Well, hey, look, this is the hospitality. The hospitality is you're going to give your guests more than they need. Now, also understand that this is out, on the backside of nowhere, and travelers coming by, you would want to give them more than just one sandwich. You know what I mean? You'd want to give them stuff that they could take a little, take a to-go bag with them. So the idea is you got 3 strangers who are here. They're going to make up about 60 loaves of bread. Hey, when I say loaf, think more like a pita bread. Not a big loaf of bread, but pita bread. And what they're going to do is they're going to make up a batch of bread so that everybody that comes is going to be able to get 20 loaves of pita bread. Okay, that's good. That's a nice thing. So make ready quickly 3 measures of fine meal, knead it, make cakes upon the hearth. And I love verse 7. Verse 7 is so near and dear to my heart. Verse 7 says, Abraham ran unto the herd and fetched a calf, tender and good, and gave it to a young man, and he hastened to dress it. Now, King James English, you understand that to dress the calf means the calf's going to be butchered and quartered and worked up into workable pieces that it can be cooked. Now, I love so many different things about this verse. The first thing I love is that Abraham ran to the herd to do it. It's going to tell us here in just a couple more verses that Abraham and Sarah are well advanced in age right now. But Abraham is still enthusiastic enough that he's going to run out to the herd and he's going to find, he's not just going to, tell the kid, go cut out a calf from the herd. He's going to go quickly, personally, to select the calf that's going to be presented to his guests. Oh man, he's running to do it. Now, come on, in the ancient Near East, it was seen to be not a gentlemanly thing, certainly not a thing for a respected elder to do, to be running, and certainly to be running out in the herd trying to chase one particular calf. But Abraham, in the service of hospitality, is so dedicated to it, he gets up and he does it. And what else does he do? He selects a calf, this is the King James terms, tender and good. Wow. He doesn't select one of the old, one of the old cows that's best days have been behind her and try to, pass that old cow off as filet mignon. No, he goes out and gets a calf, tender and good. And I've always hoped that that would be characteristic of my ministry, that in the end, when it's all said and done, that I had a ministry that was like Abraham's calf, that it was tender and good, that it wasn't an old gristly thing, that it was actually superb. So Abraham ran unto the herd and fetched a calf, tender and good, and gave it to a young man, and he hastened to dress it. And he took butter and milk and the calf which he had dressed, and set it before them. And he stood by them under the tree, and they did eat. See how this posture has been changed? He was sitting under the shade of the tent, and he gets up to greet them, then he bows down to welcome them. Then he gets up and he's running around doing all kinds of things. And then while they are seated under the shade of the tree, he stands while they're eating. Because that's, he will be at their service to extend hospitality throughout the time of their meal. They can take as much time as they want. They can eat all they want. By the way, that one calf, tender and good, you know what? That's going to serve 60 people. I mean, if you're going to have a quarter pounder for everybody, right, then you're easily going to be able to dress out that calf and serve, actually, for real, you can probably serve upwards of 100 people from that calf if everybody gets a quarter pounder. Now, also understand, back in the day, this was not a situation where everybody sat down and had a filet mignon. This is not how it was done back then. Back in the day, meat was like a seasoning. It was something, a quarter pound would have been considered to be a very generous thing. You wouldn't sit down just to eat meat. They'd see that as crazy. But to be able to have enough and plenty to take with you was just a wonderful, wonderful thing. And here's the thing for our taste and see insight of the day is the eagerness with which Abraham goes through the process of preparing the food for these unexpected guests. What do you do when guests show up unexpectedly? I mean, you're minding your own business. Somebody knocks on the door. Hey, it's Uncle so-and-so. We're in from out of town. We just thought we would drop in to say hello. What do you do? What are you going to do, right? I mean, unexpected guests, sometimes you just want to kind of look out the window and act like nobody's home. But Abraham was like, hooray, we have guests. We have an opportunity to extend hospitality. He prepares all this food. He has a calf butchered. They're making 60 loaves of bread. They're bringing it out. They've got butter. They've got milk. They've got all this stuff. It brings up just an interesting insight for our taste and see lesson for the day. And here it is. How much time do you suppose people in America take to prepare the food they eat? How much time do you think that takes? So I'm reading Genesis 18. I'm thinking, wow, how much time did Abraham take to prepare food for 3 strangers? And I mean, this you're talking about farm to table. This is the whole thing. He's going out, starting with the flour to bake the bread, starting with a calf standing there mooing at you, and he's going to turn this all into a meal. Well, how much time do you suppose that took? And I would have to say, I'm just saying, in my lifetime, I once helped my uncle butcher a calf. It took all day. And I mean all day. And it was hard work. And we had some modern conveniences that Abraham certainly didn't have. But how much time do you suppose the average American takes to prepare food, to serve it, and to clean up? Average day, what do you think? Well, the Bureau of Labor Statistics keeps track of that kind of stuff. They do time studies on the amount of time Americans spend doing different things. And in their most recent survey, this is from 2014, most recent survey said that the average American spends 37 minutes a day preparing food, serving the food, and cleaning up after eating the food. 37 minutes a day? Wow. You know, I heard that and immediately I thought, there's no way you can prepare a meal 3 times a day, breakfast, lunch, dinner, in 37 minutes and get it all cleaned up. And then it's like, oh, wait a minute, this is America. What's happening is we've got so many people that are putting something in the microwave, right? You put it in the microwave, you put it on the microwave for 3 minutes, and then you eat it out of the container that it comes in, and you throw it away, ba-boom, ba-bing, you're done, right? Well, that got me thinking. If food that we physically eat is an analogy meant to teach us something about our spiritual nourishment and sustenance, I'm wondering if we're not trying to get away with a fast food approach to our spiritual lives as well. Ooh, wait a minute. Now, let that sink in for a minute. I want to give you some comparisons, just so we have something to go by. If Americans are spending 37 minutes a day to prepare the food, cook the food, eat the food, clean up from the food in 37 minutes, that's not one meal. That's breakfast, lunch, and dinner. That's all the meals of the day. What's going on elsewhere around the world? I'm glad you asked. So it turns out I've got, I love this stuff. I got a little bit of research from around the world about how much time different cultures, different countries typically take to prepare their food. Here's what I found. The bing, 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 the winner, the country that spends the most time in food preparation, and by the way, they're factoring into this, going to the market, going to the store, right? The country that spends the most time in food preparation, cooking, and cleaning up afterwards and eating, that country is India. India, and by the way, these statistics are like on a weekly basis, so come on, you divide this by 7, you figure it out. But in India, they spend a little more than 13.25 hours a week preparing food, eating food, cleaning up from the food. So it's almost 2 hours a day are devoted to food preparation. Now, once again, watch. They're most often working with, unprepared food that is not highly processed. So they're beginning with the vegetables that need to be chopped. They're beginning with, meat that might need to be cooked. They're beginning, in many cases, with a chicken, right? You can work up a chicken pretty quickly. But so India is 13.25 hours a week. Ukraine comes in at about 13 hours a week in food preparation and cleanup and everything. South Africa spends 9.5 hours a week cooking. Indonesia, 8 hours, 8.3 hours. And we kind of go down through the list. Italy is, think about Italian cuisine. And in Italy, they're spending just about an hour a day. So they're spending 7 hours a week in food preparation. Spain's about the same. Canada, we've got 6.4 hours. The United States, 5.9 hours in food preparation every week. So less, do the math there. But it's not even an hour a week, not even an hour a day that is devoted to food preparation. Coming in at the bottom of the stack with the least amount of food preparation in their daily lives is South Korea. South Korea, every week, they only spend 3.5 hours a week in food preparation. Now, I don't know if that means they're eating out all the time. I don't know if that means they're just popping things in the microwave. But that's a 10-hour swing in the amount of time that's being devoted to cooking in a week. But think about it. If physical food is an analogy for spiritual food, let's just go ahead and drive this home. How much time are we spending preparing and consuming and meditating on or ruminating over our spiritual food? How much time do we spend in Bible study? How much time do we spend in prayer? How much time do we spend in worship and in praise? Or have we become, like so much of the culture, addicted to a fast food religion, addicted to like a drive-in style of worship? Yeah, something to think about. Something to think about. Let's go back to Abraham and Sarah. This is so amazing. We've got Abraham and Sarah. You know what? His guests are being fed. They've got, what do they have? They've got beef. They've got milk. They've got butter. They've got bread. They have a nice roast beef sandwich right there. And they're eating. They're under the tree. And verse 9, and they said unto him, that is, the travelers said unto Abraham, where is Sarah your wife? And he said, behold, in the tent. Without asking him, by the way, how do you know my wife's name? If you're just traveling through here, and I don't recall telling you my wife's name, but you're asking about Sarah, which is my wife's name, and you're asking where she is. Okay. Well, behold, in the tent. And he said, I will certainly return unto thee according to the time of life, and lo, Sarah thy wife shall have a son. And Sarah heard it in the tent door, which was behind him. Now, Abraham and Sarah were old and well stricken in age. Whew. Not just old, but well stricken in age. Mercy. And it ceased to be with Sarah after the manner of women. That is, she's too old to be having kids. Therefore Sarah laughed within herself, saying, after I'm waxed old, shall I have pleasure, my Lord being old also? And the Lord said to Abraham, wherefore did Sarah laugh? What's she laughing about? Saying, shall I of a surety bear a child, which am old? Verse 14. Is anything too hard for the Lord? At the time appointed I will return unto thee according to the time of life, and Sarah shall have a son. Whew. Wow. One of the most powerful passages in the entirety of the Old Testament. The strangers, who we're going to find out later, are angels. This is a theophany. This is an Old Testament appearance of Christ, right? So the stranger, the angels, came and they gave good news to Sarah. They gave a promise to Sarah. Even though she's well stricken with age, she will, according to the time of life, right? According to 9 months later, they come around here and she will be with child. That's tremendous. That is a promise that God gave all the way back there in Genesis 18. It's a promise that we still reap benefits from today. Because remember, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, all the way down through the 42 generations to Jesus. This is a promise that we reap the benefit of even today. Now, what do we make of this? What do we make of the promise that's given? What do we make of this opportunity that Abraham took to extend hospitality? Well, bear in mind that this I believe, this is a miracle, right? It's the announcement of a miracle. This is the heralding of God getting ready to do some work. And it takes place in the context of a stranger who's just passing by. And remember, the stranger did not ask for hospitality. The hospitality was offered. There's a movie called Winter's Bone in Jennifer Lawrence, her first major motion picture, I think. And one of the characters in Winter's Bone says, never ask for what ought to be offered. Abraham is offering hospitality. And when he offers the hospitality, it is graciously offered and it's graciously accepted. And he gets a blessing out of it. How many blessings have we missed because we've not taken the initiative to reach out and offer hospitality to those that the Lord puts in our pathway. And that hospitality can be so easy and so simple. What could be more simple than just sharing a sandwich with somebody, which is basically what Abraham was doing, okay, on a big scale, but it was what Abraham was doing with these travelers. I'd like to encourage you in the next week or so, pay attention to how much time you're investing in everything that goes around with a meal. Take a little time to prepare the meal. Maybe you're involving a child or a grandchild in the preparation of that meal. Maybe sometimes, children, grandchildren, they can set the table while you're cooking. Involve them in the cooking. Make it a project for the entire household. And then, as you notice, when the food is placed on the table's set, everybody comes around and sits down. Then what happens? Then you've got the opportunity to offer thanks, the opportunity to say a table grace, which is a tremendous spiritual opportunity for children, for a family, to remember that it's by God's grace. Remember, it's called a table grace. It's by God's grace that we're able to nourish ourselves and to share all of the good blessings that God bestows upon us. Well, there are some things to think about. How do we treat strangers? How do we express a welcome? How is it that God can communicate to us? What should happen when we gather around a table? All of these good things we're going to delve into much, much more as Taste and See continues over the many upcoming weeks. It's my hope and plan. I've got about 52 of these different lessons lined up, so we encourage you to, go ahead, tell a neighbor, tell somebody else, let them know that Taste and See is a webcast and that you're invited to gather around the table. So until next week, I bid you, as they say, bon appetit and all of God's richest blessings. God bless you. Take care until we see you next week on Taste and See.